Average person who doesn't work out, doesn't know how to push his body, doesn't do this.
Right.
That's not us. It's not a sprint. It's a grind. You got to do it day in and day out and keep getting wins. That was my deal. I would have got it. Smile, dial, and make a pile. Okay, that's my slogan. There's a million of them. Only a few people succeed at a high level. Everybody, welcome to The Real Hustle. Today is a really special day for two reasons. One, it's my mother's birthday.
Happy
she turns
birthday,
84
Mom.
Today.
How much?
84.
Wow.
And today,
I was so scared that she was going to be younger than me.
today we are blessed with like true greatness from our generation.
That's probably not the best word.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. You made my mornings for a long time.
I certainly wasn't blessing you when I did it.
It was great stuff. So today is Jackie Martling's here, a.k.a. Jackie the Joke Man.
And it is very nice to be here wherever we are.
We are in lovely South Jersey, Marlton, New Jersey. You know, we got some cows and the pigs, but we also got some big city stuff too.
Yeah, wherever we are, we're far away from that.
So I don't know for some of our listeners, because some of our audience is younger. Jackie is an author, a comedian, an actor, has produced some albums, 2 books.
Oh, I had 4 books in the early 80s. Then I had another one in 1998 with Simon & Schuster that sold through the roof. And then I had another joke book about 4 years ago, but my autobiography, The Joke Man Bow to Stern, sold really, really well, and that came out probably 6 years ago.
So for some of you who don't know, Jackie was on the Howard Stern show from 1983.
I met him in 1983, and I left in 2001.
2001. So,
a healthy run.
Yeah, and you know, behind all the brilliance of Howard was Jackie's jokes that they were writing. And I remember when we were at a dinner a while ago, and you know, everybody knows all the technology we have today. It was done with Post-its?
No, it was done with 8 by 10 or what is 8.5 by 11 stacks of paper, like printer, copy paper.
Just writing,
and actually writing them and flipping them over and putting them in front of him
while the show's going on
in real time until we got the E-show. That was from 86 to I think 89 or 90. Whenever the E-show started, then they put a lipstick camera, a small camera to my left, and there was a bin. So I was writing the jokes and putting them in the bin with the camera, and so Howard had a monitor that was the Jackie Show.
Gotcha.
You know? Although it was the Jackie Show and the Fred Show, because Fred wrote stuff too. But that's specifically what that monitor was for. And we did it in real time, and it was pretty phenomenal. It'd never been done. You know, in the old days in radio, like if Bing Crosby and Bob Hope were on the radio, they'd be fooling around, and then during commercial break, their writers would be scrambling to give them jokes to outdo the other guy. But this is in real time.
That's awesome.
And it's only due, in all fairness, to Howard's brilliance, because to be able to sit there and I'm talking to you, and all of a sudden somebody puts a note there, and I work it right into the conversation. Sometimes he would read it cold, and sometimes he'd read it not wrong, but he wouldn't read what I wrote because it might be a weird word or a weird letter, and it just led to just such fun. And I would write stuff like that insulted Gary, and sometimes Gary was the producer of the show, and he would read it, but he'd twist it and make it about Fred, or he'd twist it and make it about me. I mean, not only we were going on the fly, you know, and sometimes, you know, we're working real time, so things are moving. We're moving for 5 hours, and if I got something up there not quite in time, sometimes he would circle the conversation around to get back to that, to use that line if
That's
it was
awesome.
good enough. You know, so it was fun.
So
and to this day, the arguments linger. I'm not linger; they carry on because so many people knew what I was doing, but there's still people that have no idea, and people fight. Like, what do you mean you were writing stuff? Because all I sat there and laughed, and I had a good laugh, and I was fun to make fun of. So that
legendary laugh.
So it was enough to justify me being in the room. And then people, what do you mean he was writing? I'm like, well, had a lot to do with a lot,
So I want to back up like way before the show, because when I was doing some homework to think about what we're going to talk about today, I was surprised. Michigan State mechanical engineering.
Michigan State mechanical engineering class of 1971. You got to give me an idea. I listened to you talking to the guy that has 29 restaurants.
Yes,
came up by his bootstraps. But that's great. But do you interview restaurateurs, or do you interview people from New Jersey that are successful, or do you interview people that do real estate?
The base of the show is we interview a lot of real estate people, and then we mix in some people who I think who have great stories along the way. And when I was doing some homework, and I had met you at the dinner a while back, and I'm like, I think Jackie would be great because the people in the office laugh. Like, I tell jokes all day long, the corniest jokes ever. They buy me joke books all the time, and I was like, this will be fun because that guy's made me laugh for 15 years, 20
and
years.
Real estate is a hustle, and show business is a hustle,
Exactly,
and comedy is a hustle, and radio is a hustle. I guess if you widen the umbrella enough, everything is a hustle.
That is correct. And then when I looked at, I always talk about how to be successful in real estate is you got to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. So what more uncomfortable situation don't you have with a comedian going up, and I'm sure there's been shows that you've knocked out of the park, and there's been shows that you've bombed.
No, never.
So I'm like, how uncomfortable would it be if you're going up there, you're writing this great material, and you're
there is no way to describe, I have a podcast too called Stand Up Memories that I do with a guy that I've known for 40 years. He actually dragged me into the comic strip in Manhattan, Peter Bales. He's also a history professor. And we have comics on, but it always comes up that it's so funny. If you get a bunch of comedians sitting around, nobody talks about the fantastic show I had in Baltimore or the unbelievable show that Richie Minervini had in Kansas City. But if somebody says, "Did you hear Rob Bartlett bombed in Newark?" Like, well, no, tell me, because all you want to do is talk about the horror stories because they're so fun and so funny, and the experiences people have had are frightening. The most money I ever made for a show ever was a New Year's Eve in Boston, and I didn't know when I booked it, but it was for the mob, and it was like 8 or 10 big, round banquet tables with like 8 or 10 people at each of them, and it was, these guys and their wives, and there's no opening act. There's a horrible sound system, and it was a riser, like a chorus riser, that when you moved, the microphone clunked and clunked. And I couldn't even be in the back because there was no place to go. And somebody said, "Oh, let's bring on the comedian." And I walked up, and it was a intermittent microphone. Do you know what I'm talking? In other words, it was going on and off. So
every other word was it's like a bad cell phone reception.
Horrible situation. These guys are drunk. They've just eaten. They got no sense of humor. Say, "Hey, hear about the guy that..." And the trouble with that is you don't know when it's going to go on and stay. And if all of a sudden it stays on a little while, the whole time. And meanwhile, I thought I was going to get killed. And they loved it. "Oh, you're the greatest guy ever, blah, blah, blah." I don't think they heard a word I said. And I walked away with a frightening amount of money. But I was on that stage for 4 days. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's how
it felt
works,
like, right?
When you're bombing or bombing or think you're bombing. Sometimes you think you're bombing and you're not. Sometimes you think you're doing well and you didn't, But it's I tell people it is the greatest job in the world when you're doing well. And it's the worst job in the world when you're not doing well.
Does that sound familiar, all you real estate agents out there? It's the greatest job in the world when you're doing well.
In other words, if you're sitting there and all of a sudden you realize, I'm not getting anywhere with this person.
Yes. Move on.
How does that happen? Like if you do a deal, is it a bunch of meetings or is it one main meeting?
It depends. I mean, some people you work with for years. Other people you meet twice and you sell them a house and they make.
How quickly do you know it's not working if it's not working?
That's a great skill that you have to learn because some people hold on the commission, like they look at them as a commission check, and that relationship goes on and on and on. But I kind of cut through that because I can, one of the skills, like, you read your audience, right? You might have to change.
I read my audience and then tell the same jokes.
Yeah, but you might say it differently or move them around.
Absolutely.
Right?
I did years ago. It was actually my last road gig before I quit to go on the Stern Show full time. And I got down to Nashville, Tennessee. There's a club called Zany's, a very popular club in Chicago, and they opened a place in Nashville called Zany's Nashville. And I went up and I did horribly. They were nice, but they just really weren't laughing like they should. And I thought about it when I got home. And the next night I did the exact same act, only I did it slower.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not stupid. They just don't they don't move as fast as, like, we all have friends that talk too fast.
Mm-hmm.
Even too fast for us, And I killed them.
Slowed it down.
Just slowed it down.
Reading your audience. Just same thing when you're selling houses. Look at personalities. Know what you say. If you got a low talker, you talk low. You mimic them. And that's how you win the audience over. It's the same thing in real estate. It's no different. I'm on stage every day.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Just like when you're on stage. It's the same stuff.
Now, if you're selling a house, how often does the guy or the client send his wife or his girlfriend instead of them?
They usually don't send both.
No, well, maybe different days. But you know what I mean? Like,
no, they usually
would that throw you off?
It does.
If a really hot girl and she shows up all sexy or something.
It wouldn't bother me one bit. I might go.
Was a really sexy boy.
That would bother me a little bit.
Yeah, no, I guess after a certain amount of time,
No,
you've been doing it a while.
32 years later, it's the same
Jesus.
thing. 6,000 houses later, it's, you know how to read people, and you make decisions. This is great. This is the first interview that I'm having that I'm getting the questions. I love this.
I'm fascinated. I know a lot of people. I know people that I got a couple of friends that make gazillions of dollars in the title insurance business.
Yes.
And I still don't, after 10 or 15 years of knowing these guys, I don't know what that is. But they make frightening amounts of money because they're not doing it on a house. They're doing it on a
commercial building,
crazy
big
commercial
things.
building. And one girl from back in the 70s, a hippie, pot-smoking, hair under her arms, little oddball girl, she's selling she's selling high-rises.
Commercial, yeah.
So she sells one high-rise, ka-ching, ka-ching. She's
Correct.
a gazillionaire now.
But it goes both ways. If you have one big deal in your pipeline and it's a high-rise and it blows up for some type of reason, you make nothing. So you
still have your rent, and you still have
you still got all your expenses. So they live high on the horse when they got a couple big deals closed. My world's different. My world's residential, churning and burning, trying to do 500-600 transactions.
So it may be like this, but it's
yes, and it's a great. You just gotta be dialed in. You got to work 7 days a week, and you're always on. It's like I wake up at 5:15. I'm answering text messages, and I go till 8-9 o'clock.
It's a different world than before the cell phone and the text. I'm sure. Many years ago, you came home at 5 o'clock and you watched the news and then sat down and enjoyed yourself.
I always wanted to say this. You can call Jackie at 516-922-WINE. You still have it going?
Since 1979. That you talk about a hustle.
Hustle.
You
right?
talk about a hustle. In this is a long story, but in 1978, I was still playing in a band. It was me and another guy, it was me and the guy that taught me to play guitar, and we had a keyboard player, and we were great. I mean, we were hokey, played all original songs, stupid, silly songs, but our crowd loved us. And once in a while, we got to play at a place on Long Island called My Father's Place. I've spent my whole life explaining to people, my father didn't own the bar. The name of it was My Father's Place. And Epi from My Father's Place is been known to everybody forever, and he's still, running around with that name trying to do stuff. And Michael Epstein, such a cheap putz that is the reason that I'm a comedian. Because we went in, this is a big club, like Springsteen and Billy Joel on their way up, played this place. And so we get to play, we're playing at my father's place, and we're excited. And, this is one of those gigs where all your fans come. So maybe we're going to have 300 people. Over the course of 2 years, maybe there's 300 different people. But this is the night they all come out. And we go in to do our sound check, and the cheap son of a bitch had booked gong show auditions from ABC TV to make a few extra dollars in the afternoon, so we can't do a sound check. So I'm sitting there, and I see these comedians, the audition for the gong show, and I'm like, I'm as funny as these guys.
So did you audition that night?
No. But the Richie Minervini wound up, he's still one of my best friends 45 years later. So I went up to him and said, how the hell did you get to be a comedian? And he said, very simple. I had cards printed up. And he was a real estate person and decided to give it a shot. And so he invited me to Richard M. Dixon's White House Inn. Okay, There's a guy in Long Island had his face surgically changed, altered. He already looked somewhat like him to look like Richard M. Dixon.
Oh,
his name was Richard M. Dixon.
Of all the people you want to look like?
And this guy wouldn't pay us. He said, you don't need money, you need television. And he was such a character. And he'd give us $5 and all we could drink. And there's a million stories, but it was a drag. We had 7 great guys, the core of us. We called ourselves the Magnificent Seven. And trust me, we weren't. We sucked. But we said, we got to do something. We found a club on Long Island. It was in Huntington, and that's where Richie was from. And it was an upstairs club, a restaurant bar. And we said, can we have a comedy show here? We'll tell the jokes, and we'll collect the money at the door, and you have the drinks. And they said, sure. And I'm like, Richie, this is great, but how the hell are we going to get the word out? We don't have any money. And I got the bright idea. I remember where I was when it hit me. I was walking up the attic. My first joke land was my mother's attic. And I said, I'll get a phone line. I'll tell a joke. Then say we're going to be at Cinnamon's tonight in Huntington. And then I'll tell another joke. It's radio. It's television. A little bit of product, and then a commercial. And it immediately was busy all the time. And that's a whole book. It went from 1 to 10 lines.
So how many people would call in?
It's frightening what it built to. And now it's just the second line in my house. And once in a while the red light goes off, and I'm like, because I don't have the heart. Because people like you come up and say, you still have that no, I remember calling that 516-922-WINE 30 years ago, and I go, ahead, dial it. And people take the phone. Hey, this is Jackie. Thanks for using it. But they can't believe it,
I was talking to a couple of my friends and knew you were coming down today. And the one guy puts in the text thread, he's like, 516-922-WINE. We were laughing. Because Howard always would end the show, would have that on there to call you.
Well, when I first started on NBC, I always got plugs all the time. And it was funny because I did 2 weeks with him. I was there 1 day a week for 3 years. And the first, that was my name, Jackie 922-WINE Martling. And then the next week it was Jackie 922-WINE Martling. And then he gave me a phone call. And he said, I got some bad news for you. I said, well, hell, it was fun going to NBC He says, we love you and we want you here, but we can't advertise 516-922-WINE anymore because I guess one of the executives dialed it and his ear melted. But they already set the hook. I'm like, I don't care. You call me horseshit Charlie. I don't care, So, but I actually had that. That was my license plate, 922-WINE.
Okay.
And it was a whole comedy thing. People just the other day on my podcast, the guy said, I remember when I started in comedy, that it was just crazy. There would every toll booth going to Jersey, it was sticking somewhere, it was a challenge to put them everywhere.
It was awesome.
It was just good. And that's how we got people into the club,
So, being a diehard Stern fan and comedian, I always love comedians. So there's 3 guys that always stood out to me on the Stern show. And that would come on. And that was Sam Kinison.
Unbelievable.
Dice.
Unbelievable.
and Rickles.
No,
No, he was on. No, he was on.
You don't mean Rickles. You mean Pat Cooper?
Pat Cooper. He got on my nerves a little bit, but he was.
You know, people think Pat was ready to jump over the console and strangle Howard, but he'd be going ranting and raving, and he'd turn to me and Fred, and he'd wink.
Playing
so yeah, he was playing. Kinnison, I knew from very early on, like 1979, and it's a crazy story. There was a guy that booked shows in New Jersey named Jim Balatzos. I used to book shows and get the guys, and other people book shows. You know, you have the speakers and the microphone, and you book the club, and then you get the comics, and you bring them, and you get money, and you give some of the money to them. So this guy, Jim Balatzos, started doing well enough that instead of setting up the equipment himself, he had a van, and he had a couple guys that actually set up the sound system. You know, this is level 2 of the bottom of show business, but the next level up. And these guys are setting up at some point, and as they're setting up, I'm there, you know, early, and as they're setting up, one guy goes, "Ow, ow!" And I'm like, what's this guy got, Tourette's or something, you know? And they're setting up, all of a sudden one guy will go, "Leper! Leper!" I'm like, what's wrong with these guys? And then a couple of gigs later, whatever, I go to the Improv. We meet at the Improv, and Jim Balazzo says to me, "Jackie, this is Sam. I brought him out from Los Angeles, and we'll see how he does out here." I said, "All right." So I get in the van with him and this guy, Max Dolcelli. Everybody from 50 years, they're still doing it. Mm-hmm. You can't name a name that, oh, yeah, he was working Charlie's, you know. And we get in the van, and here's this little troll of a guy with his beret on, and we're drinking, of course, and having so much fun. And we get to this club, and it was so far out in Jersey. There was a disco ball, and they tied up the disco ball so that people could see us. I mean, it's not even a believable story. Little tiny stage. And in 1979 or 1980, people just weren't used to a comedy show, like especially in a bar or restaurant. Like people are used to watching TV and seeing a comedian, but all of a sudden somebody your own age is going to go up there and face the wrong way. And the premise of them making you laugh was like, wow, Fangul, right? So Jim Balazzo says to me, he says, "Listen, I don't know. Sam's a little different. I don't know how he's going to do tonight. So MC the show, but save a good hunk of your stuff to do after him, just in case." And I'm telling you, Mark, it was like it happened this morning. It's how clear it is to me. These people, you know, there's a decent amount of people. It's a small restaurant bar, but there's probably 100, maybe 150 people there. And I introduce him, and Sam goes up and takes the microphone and starts pacing back and forth on the stage like a tiger in a cage. "You don't know me. You haven't seen me before. Remember this face. And remember." But in my mind, he did that for 5 minutes. It was probably a minute, maybe a little more, but it seemed like, because when you go up on stage, you're so anxious to get something going. He's like, "You don't know me, but you're going to hear about me." And then he leaned over to a woman right in front and said, "Because I live in hell! Ow! My wife is a ow! Ow!" And like, holy Christ, it was like a atom bomb went off, and he proceeded to yell at them for 40 minutes, and it was spectacular. And when he got done, I walked up on stage, and I don't know if you've ever seen the old film clips, the black and white film clips of the people sitting in the theater when there was like a 3D movie in the 50s, and they're all like this. I walked up, and they were all like they seen a ghost, you know, and it was just a start. And we'd got drunk all the way back to, you know, to Manhattan. He said, "You're a good entertainer, man." I said, "Yeah, you certainly are too, you know." And then years later, sitting there on the Stern Show, all of a sudden he comes walking in, he said, "What are you doing here, man?" Yeah. The same thing you are, you know. And we were friends still, you know, till he left us. He's just a great, generous, wacky, wonderful guy. And Dice I knew forever too. Dice still swears that the thing that really kicked him into gear was a VHS tape that we did with Red Fox called Red Fox's Dirty, Dirty Jokes. Now everything, you have all these stories, but now everything's on the internet.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, bullshit. It's like, well, go. And
because Dice was the hottest thing going for.
Oh, God. Well, this is very, very early on. He used to come to the East Side Comedy Club, which is what the show we started in Huntington grew into this East Side Comedy Club, the first comedy club in Long Island. And I used to break his balls and call him Andy because he's Andrew Silverstein.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he just went to the moon.
Not as cool as Dice Man. Yeah, Andrew Silverstein, right?
He just, and he's great. He's a sweet character, really nice guy, Always had, we had wars on the telephone, me and him, but it was radio. People don't, oh, you guys are going to kill each other. I'm like, people don't get it.
Entertainment.
Yeah.
Pure entertainment.
But they love to think. And then sometimes it's really is animosity, which is so funny. What's it? So many of these stories I go to tell, and I say, Jackie, make sure you have the guy's name before you tell the story, and it's not coming up.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question. So who was your favorite guest of all time?
That's I got to come up with a stock answer for that because I never have an answer for that. I know me and Fred Norris was the other writer on the Stern Show. We loved when Pat Cooper came because it was going to be so much energy and so crazy, and he was going to make us laugh. I loved Dice coming in, but he didn't make me and Fred laugh. You get weird when you're a writer, and Gilbert was great. Gilbert was always fun and funny.
He was a character.
But Pat was a whole nother level, and a lot of the really weird characters that came on would make you laugh, But so many of them were so great, But Belzer was always great. Pat Cooper was always great.
Belzer used to get on my nerves. I didn't like him as much.
He's like Gilbert. There's people like the minute Gilbert comes on, I turn it off. The minute Belzer comes on, I turn it off. And other people are like, oh man, I can't believe Gilbert's going to be on today. Or they're definitely on off.
Yes.
So I could take him or leave.
That's why you gotta dial on your radio so you can switch it over to whatever you
turn
want.
off Gilbert and then you hit Belzer on another show and then you drive into a wall.
So
always interesting. Always interesting.
And like I listened to Stern till probably like 6 years ago, and I couldn't. It wasn't the same.
Did you pick up on it? All the way back at WNBC. I don't even know how old are you?
When he came to YSP in Philly, is when I started listening. So it was probably about 89.
You came to in the 86.
I was in high school. I was a senior in high school in 86. Then I used to work at my brother's pizza shop. And we'd always have it on. We'd listen in the morning, and then when they started replaying it, But I listened all through college and my professional career, working all through the 90s. I thought it was at its peak all through the 90s.
The amount of people that come up and say, you got me through high school, you got me through college, you got me through my first job, like people come up and say, I'm sure you're sick of hearing this, but, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, say, if I ever get sick of hearing this, shoot me.
Yeah.
I had a guy, you wind up with great stories. I have a guy who said that my laugh was the first sound he can remember in his life because he was a little kid in the back seat, and his parents or his father, whoever's listening to the Stern Show, and he don't, he's a baby, he doesn't know what they're talking, but he hears, and it stood out. And then years later, he says, "Where do I know? I know that from my childhood." I said, "You realize how old you make me feel?" So that's so fun,
it was awesome. Stump the Joke, man. These are all just great bits. And the show was, it was on regular radio, so it wasn't dirt. It was just funny, witty.
That is one of the things people say to me, hey, you want to come over to my house tonight? Well, you got to be careful because my grandmother's going to be there. I say, you moron. I said, for 18 years, I sat on the Stern Show. I never got bleeped. People forget we couldn't be dirty. We were filthy and outrageous.
Yeah.
And we broke every law. I always say we. He broke every rule, but we weren't dirty. People forget that because all of a sudden you're unserious and you can say whatever you want. But to me, towing that line was so fun and finding ways to say this, that, and the other things.
So I was thinking about too. I want to go back a little bit, far back. So when you graduate with a degree in mechanical engineering from college, and then were you ever an engineer, or you just played in the band?
Please,
you played in the band the whole time.
I went to college at the greatest time of man. I was a fairly straight guy in high school because I played in the band, I played soccer, I was a gymnast, I did track and field, I sang in the chorus, I drank beer, I worked at a fantastic country club. There was no more room in my life for more fun. Mm-hmm. I had nothing against pot, but it really wasn't a thing yet. But I wasn't a jock. I was just a regular ball breaking guy. And it's funny because people say, "Oh, I started smoking pot when I was 9. I started smoking pot when I was 18." If you're my age, it wasn't when did you start smoking pot? How old were you? It's where were you in 1967? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I started smoking pot after freshman year of college, between freshman and sophomore year, and somehow I wound up in a liberal dorm at Michigan State. Now, forget it, but it was immense. It was like 40,000 people. It's a true story. My family was very weird, so nobody ever said, "By the way, you got to go to college. Where would you like to go to college?" I was just from a nice area of Long Island where it was assumed we're all going to college, but It wasn't a prep school. It was a regular high school. And I realized if I want to go to college, I better do something about it. So I sent away for this book. It was called the Barron's Book of Colleges. It was this thick. I started leafing through it. I swear, Mark, it's the truth. Actually, Michigan State University, underneath it in parentheses, it said 40,000. And I said, that's 20,000 girls. I swear to God. But I got accepted to Rutgers and to Syracuse, but I wanted to go far enough away to get away from my hometown. But by 67, and I started smoking pot, I was a hippie. So I'm in engineering school. I had failed enough classes. And I actually dropped out. The turn of tune in, turn on, drop out, that whole thing in 1969. And then my band went out to Cape Cod because I met a girl. I met a sorority girl of all things. And I fell in love with her, and we went out to Cape Cod. And I said, she graduated, but I didn't because I didn't have enough credits. I said, let's go back to Michigan State and you work and I'll go back to school because I got a girlfriend now. The party's over. So we went back to Michigan State. And so I'm walking around the engineering building with a ponytail and bare feet and my dog, and guys are cheating off my physics exam, but I had no intention of ever. And my father had gone to school for engineering for a couple of years when he was in Alabama State or something like that. So I had no intent. And guys, I just interviewed with General Motors today. I'm going to start with $25,000 and they give me a house. I got a job at Ford, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why don't you say my life is over?
Never crossed your mind.
Forget about being jealous. I felt sorry for them. I said to myself, look, if I'm going to play music.
Not your typical engineer, guys.
If I'm going to keep drinking, I might as well be making money while I'm doing it. So I just kept playing rock and roll. And stayed at a college town. It's a bubble. So I stayed at Michigan State for 7 years. And then finally...
Just played all different places.
And a guy just, a friend of mine got me out of there because my girlfriend and I had broken up and there was skeletons in the closet. And he just yanked me and got me out of there. And I went to Denver and worked construction for a little under 6 months. That's all I needed.
6 months of that, you'll
never going to be another straight job. So at home, played music the whole 70s, and then I realized if I want to eat, I better change.
Yeah.
Because,
And then when you met Rick Dees on a show, is that what it was?
No, Rick. All these stories are just not believable.
Okay.
My dial-a joke, 516-922-WINE, And then I got a second line. I actually called up the phone company. This is in my mother's attic. And I said, listen, I've got this phone line, and I got to have a second line. I got to have a rollover. Like if you call and it's busy, second one rolls over.
A lot of people might not know what a busy signal is because they don't know what that is. A busy signal is when you call and someone's on a line. It's just busy. Young kids don't know that. It just goes right
never processed.
A lot of people don't even know that. What's a busy signal?
The other day I heard somebody say to somebody, have you ever heard of a dial tone? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So, true story, I called up and said, I got to have a second line. This is my mother's attic. And they said, I'm sorry, sir. You're not zoned for business. We can't do that. And he goes, wait a minute. Are you the guy with the jokes? Because if in any industry, if something happens in the real estate industry, you're the first person to know about it. So all of a sudden there's a guy telling dirty jokes, and it must have gone around. And they said, you know what, we'll give you the second line. Then I called up and I said, I got to have more lines. They sent a foreman because they're so curious. He comes up to my mother's attic and sees the setup, which was just frighteningly, thinkers to ever's to chance. And I got a second 2 lines. Then I got another 2 lines. A different foreman came. And then I called him and said, I got to have more. They're always busy. And the guy said, all right, Jackie, we'll give you 4 more. You can have 10 lines, but that's it, okay? Meanwhile, it's getting more and more famous. Famous on a small scale. Everybody has called it and told other people about it. And what's so strange is I would plug in a phone, like a Y thing, and one of the phones would ring, and I'd answer it before the answering machine picked up. Oh, this is Jackie. Don't hang up. This is really me. And usually they'd hang up because they're calling from work.
Yeah.
But the people that I got to hang on were calling from Alaska. They're calling from Mexico. They're calling from Paris. And none of them had ever seen the sticker. Most of them had never heard of me. They were just heard about this line with his jokes, and it got passed around. So this girl in California told Rick Dees, who was the #1 disc jockey in Los Angeles, she was part of this thing where they had this little book where there's a little gang of people that had all the weird phone numbers you can call and talk about things people wouldn't remember. In 1979, 80, there were credit cards. And the way you made a phone call is you plugged in the credit
card number.
But I guess by then it was touch tone. It's hard to it must have been touch tone.
Just started.
And they would pass around these numbers where you could get the weather or get this. And all of a sudden I was their hero because here's a guy telling jokes. And some girl called Rick Dees and told him about this. And so, I monitored this. I had jokes on every day for 7 years, different jokes every day, 7 days a week for 7 years, me and my future ex-wife, Nancy. And my sister came home one day, and she had been out to visit her boyfriend's sister. No, wasn't her husband yet. And they were in Wisconsin. And she said, oh, we heard Dial a Joke. We heard 922 Wine on the radio. I said, how great is that? Well, tell me some of the jokes. And she told me one of the jokes. I said, that's not possible. I said, that was on, it couldn't have been me because that was on a couple weeks ago. And my sister said, don't be, at the time, my niece, Jessica, all of a sudden I came on the radio and she went, Uncle Ha Ha. Okay. So I'm thinking they're crazy. Okay. A couple weeks later, my friend's working in South Jersey with his construction crew. Mm-hmm. He says, Jackie, I heard 922 Wine in South Jersey. And I didn't realize it, but it was Scott and Todd or Scott Shannon in the morning playing. It wasn't him playing, but it was on Z100. What had happened was Rick Dees found out about my number, started talking about it, and he would record it. And at the time, he had a weekly top 40 countdown that actually went out on LPs, wax LPs. I'm sure people don't know what that is either. And it'd go to all the major cities, and they'd play that on Saturday, and people would hear my jokes. So what they would hear, my sister heard a joke that he had taped weeks before.
Gotcha.
And then one day he calls up and said, Jackie, I've been using 922 Wine. I love it. My audience goes crazy for it. He used to promote it on his morning show. He'd tell people, all right, now we're going to call Tom Selleck's home phone number, 516-922-9463. He told
Oh,
us
wait.
Tom sells his own book. And the thing went to the moon. He said, but now I had made it progressively dirty and dirty. He said, now there's nothing on there I can use. So I did jokes for him, sold him jokes to use each day.
Gotcha.
And he said, I'll tell everybody that you're a crazy dentist. I said, that doesn't help me. So let me go back to the drawing board. And the next day he says, how about this? You're Jackie, the joke man Martling, the guy from New York that knows all the jokes. And I said, sold. So he's the guy
Perfect.
that nobody
Jack,
knew.
He gave you the joke, man.
And here is the cleanest, most white bread guy in the world in L.A. And I'm on the air with Howard Stern, who's dark and
that's
and
awesome. That's a great story. That's an awesome story.
Just wonderful. And he was great, and he promoted. And I mean, a rollover line, okay? I had 10 rollover lines.
Mm-hmm.
If you call, this goes off. Somebody else calls, this goes off. Somebody else calls, this goes off. It's only a 1-minute tape. If you call here, and then somebody calls, this goes off, somebody else calls, this goes, but that's time allotment. If a minute is up, this machine stops, and somebody else calls, that one goes off. So the only time the 10th one went off is when all of them were engaged.
Okay.
And the 10th machine used to go to 99. We had a counter 4 or 5 times a day. Now think about that, how many times it didn't get to 10. It got to 6, it got to 3, it got to...
Awesome.
Like thousands, 5, 10, 15,000, I'm sorry, I know it's long-winded, but I'm so proud of that.
That's really cool stuff, how that works. That's awesome.
There's your hustle.
And
what a hustle.
And then so you're on the Stern Show, everything's going awesome. Howard's blowing it up and becomes everybody's always curious, like, you were making pretty good money. Did you feel you were underpaid compared to the rest of the guys there?
No, not compared to the rest of the guys. We were making a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I walked out on that show like 3 or 4 times. Like they just weren't paying me well enough. And they wouldn't budge. I said, all right, I'm going home. And every time they found the money and brought me back because he needed me.
Yeah.
He really needed me. The last time, I think he hit warp speed and was on the way to Pluto, like nobody's paying attention. How, it depends on how much you want to believe or whatever the cause was. But if I hadn't have gone to the wall and screamed for more money, so that the next time I'd be negotiating from here, and then the next time you're negotiating from here, you get to, because I started off so low. I started off at frightening, the figure I gave them. And the stories that you talk about, the hustle, the negotiation was so great. It's such a great story. We were adding markets,
left and right.
And that was so much money. They were printing money, and people, Howard's got the whole world thinking I'm cheap and I'm the most generous guy in the world. But share, if we're building,
that was special.
You share, and nobody else, you pop up, you get shot. So it wasn't comparing my salary to anybody else. I didn't care what anybody else was making. I knew what I thought I deserved. And at some point, I forget which negotiation, 92, 95, whatever it was, I was making $300,000 a year. And they offered me a 7.5% salesman's raise for the next, I said, Tom, the general manager, Tom Chiasano, I said, you got to be kidding me. This show is going through the roof. Now, I'm the only one that's on the road. Gary, Fred, none of those guys were down the. So I went out to the markets and did my comedy shows and got to know the general managers. And a lot of times, the general manager is also the owner in the smaller markets. I got to be very good friends with them. And one guy in particular, and he told me, listen, your job is to walk on stage and be funny, okay? The general manager, his job is when you come in and ask for more money, to fall out of his chair. He said that's exactly what he said. So I knew from him, he said, it doesn't matter how tiny your market is, it's $250,000. It's $250,000 if you want the Howard Stern Show on your channel, okay? And that doesn't include the price of the satellite, doesn't include anything. That's the price to come into the movie, okay? So I'm equipped with this knowledge. So they offered me $300,000, and I said no. And since the last contract, we had added 10 markets. 10 markets, okay? Now, I know that bare minimum, that's $250,000 per market.
2.5.
But some of them are like Dallas, which was
Yeah.
like probably $800,000. But bare minimum. And I said, okay, $250,000. If I'm not worth 1/25th of this show, I should shoot myself. I said, okay, so 1/25th of $250,000, $10,000, and we've added 10 markets. So I went in and I said, this is not good enough. He says, well, what kind of raise are you looking for? And I said, $100,000. And he fell off his chair. But this is the great part. So he goes, how could you come up with a stupid number like that? Very, very nonchalantly. I said, well, we've added 10 new markets, and I know the rock bottom price you get per market is $250,000. And if I'm not worth 1/25th of this show, what good am I? And he looked at me and he said, Jackie, 1/25th of $250,000 is not $10,000. I said, go ahead, there's your adding machine. And he did it and went, oh. So
Didn't even know it.
he didn't have the math right. And it's a long story, but they came up with the money. But that was me asking for a lot more money. But it was founded on something. That wasn't me just saying, I want to be cool, I want a lot of money. It's like, if you're making this much, give me this much, And I was earning it, and I had a lot to do with what was happening. And then it got to the point where, people say, oh, you were making so much money. I said, yeah, but, it's like telling Ringo, you're making a lot of money for a drummer. I'm not a drummer. I'm a drummer in the Beatles. I wasn't asking for I wasn't pricing myself out of the ball game. You price yourself out of the ball game because you want to leave the ball game, So
when you look back at that, when the last negotiation, is it something like, would you do anything different, or were you happy?
Well,
with your decision?
after a couple of months, in all honesty, I called them up and said, I miss it. But I didn't miss, well, it hadn't happened yet, but I didn't miss the fame, or I didn't miss a meal. I didn't realize how unbelievably special it was to be sitting in that room with those talented people and laughing. I mean, laughing 4 or 5 hours a day. That is like, forget about the fact that it kept me from drinking as much as I would have been drinking. But like, at such a surreal situation, you're thinking, oh, I always laugh. And you don't always laugh. That was, so, and they never called me back, which was odd. But I kind of knew I had thrown it out the window. But there's no regrets. Do I wish I had gazillions of dollars? I mean, I always said, Howard, can't we work 4 days a week? And he said, I can't. Mel won't let me. Mel Karmazin won't let me, because you got to be on every day in the morning. And then, of course, he wound up.
Then he works like 3 days a week, and then 2 days a week, and then kept making more money.
But it was a whole interesting thing. And to this day, people still yelling at me, and because I'm on the internet, or I'm doing TikTok or Twitter or something, you moron, you could add so much money, but you realize you'd be, I'm like, shut up.
That was to me, that was the peak of the show when you were, that's what, and after 2001, I thought like Artie was okay. He wasn't even close to where you were at.
But the great thing is, it's like the 1927 Yankees. The more time passes, the greater it was.
Yes.
You think every single guy stepped up and hit a home run. You know what I mean? It's And that's a consensus. I mean, I get lots of emails and stuff. I was so glad when you left that show. You sucked, and thank God you were off the show.
Can't keep everybody happy.
No. But you can get 100 emails telling how great the '90s were and how you and Billy West were the kings. And then you get one that says you suck. That's all. That's
all you remember. That's all you remember. All right. So of all the jokes, so you had That one YouTube clip has 1 million views, right? That one joke you sent me the other day. What's your favorite joke to tell of all time?
There is no favorite joke.
What's your best response? Your money joke.
It's funny because I went with my girlfriend last night to her band's videotaping, and there was 2 guys there with the same name. I'll explain it. But it was totally by coincidence, and it had nothing to do with the Stern Show. But it's a joke that I've been closing my act with forever, and it's not the best joke. It's not the worst joke. It's not the dirtiest. It's not the cleanest. But it's so short and so enjoyable. And I just told it to them last night, and the one guy had heard it, and the other guy hadn't. He went wild. The cab driver picks up a nun, and he looks in the rearview mirror and says, sister, I always fantasize about being with a nun. She says, yeah, you and everybody else. You Catholic? And he says, yes, I am. She says, pull over. He pulls over, and she gets in the front seat and gives him the best he's ever had. He feels a little weird. He says, sister, I got to tell you something. I'm not really Catholic. And she says, yeah, my name's Ralph. I'm going to a costume party. So these 2 guys I'm talking to last night, both the names were Ralph. Both the names were Ralph, and they went wild. And everybody thought that was me making fun of Ralph from the Stern Show. But I've been telling it that way since 1960.
That's great.
But that's a great show.
That's awesome.
And
I have to tell you something that drives me crazy. Nobody knows how to tell a joke anymore. Nobody. Like, I actually, my youngest daughter, we always work on telling jokes. Like, I work on our delivery. Because it makes everything, when people see you have a sense of humor, it totally changes everything.
It's like a key that opens every lock.
All they do is hold the phone. Look at this. Look what I saw. There's nothing better than telling a good joke and you take control of the room.
Because people aren't going to the bar and hanging out and telling jokes and fooling around. I already knew all the jokes in the world by 1975.
Literally, that's no joke.
But of course, there's been a zillion since then. But I was in a band, and our band played a song and told jokes, and played a song and told jokes. So of course, everybody at the bar is like, during the break, I got a joke for you, and I would actually say to people, I'll start from 10, and by the time I count down to 1, if I don't know the joke, I'll buy you a beer. And I never bought a beer. Because if they're talking about a cowboy and an Indian going across the desert, I'd say, oh, this is the one about the priest. And, because I got a logic. Hey, I'm a mechanical engineer. And I just knew all the jokes. And I loved them. But my whole life, I was the last one at the party, the last one at the bar, the last one on the acid trip, just telling jokes and telling jokes and listening and listening and listening, because you never know when you hear one. And the stories I have about that, there's a guy, Mark Hudson, who was one of the Hudson brothers, and they were the summer replacement show for Sonny and Cher.
Okay.
In the, I guess the 60s or the 70s, I don't even know, but he's brilliant and such a great guy. He had a show at a club called Iridium, which is where I used to go to see Les Paul. Les Paul passed away, but he was a very good friend. And he did a show called Thursdays on the Hudson. And it was at Iridium, and he'd have different guests. And he had Billy J. Kramer from Billy J. Kramer and Dakotas, like from back in the day of the Beatles, And I went up and told jokes, and we all had a great time. Then we're in the green room. It's a little club, and I came out, and the place is still absolutely packed. And the guy comes up and grabs me and says, Jackie, I've been a fan for 40 years, which always throws me. You don't have to say 40. You can just say a long time. Dude, Jesus Christ. He said, I've been a fan for 40 years, and I know you know every joke, but I got to try one. And there's always people say that, I got to try one. Usually they say 2 words, and I tell them the end. Mm-hmm. Right? And which always freaks them out. And I get a kick out of it. This guy told me a joke, excuse me, that is the filthiest joke you've ever heard. But you can tell it on AM radio, and you could tell it to your granddaughter.
Okay.
Now imagine something fitting that criteria. You could tell it to kids, you could tell it on the radio, but it's so disgusting I don't use it in my act because it would throw people. Because you don't want people still thinking about the last joke because they missed the next joke. A girl calls the doctor and says, Doc, I got diarrhea. Can I take a bath? He says, if you got enough, which is the word. But it's a poop joke. Kids go nuts for that.
Kids love a poop joke.
Kids love a poop joke.
Did you hear about the new movie Constipated?
It all works out in the end.
It's not out yet. I just stumped the joke, man. Well, second grade joke. He was close.
The way to stump me is to have 14 different endings. Some girl said, well, it's always,
I heard that from a second grader at the bus stop in
so
about 2003. I laughed the whole day.
I loved it. I was on the streets of L.A. getting videotaped by these guys for this show. And I'm playing Stump the Joke Man under the Pantages marquee. And nobody gets me. Nobody. And this lady's walking along with, I guess, her son, and another lady's got her daughter. Both the kids got me.
That's great. That's
Kid
awesome.
said, why were the soldiers so tired on April 1st? So right away, April. As a kid, I have no idea. He said, because they just got done with a 30-day march. Which is a great, funny joke.
That's a good one.
But the people, the great thing about that, when I know the jokes, people love it. But when I don't, they go nuts.
They go bananas.
That's the greatest thing,
awesome.
So it's a no-lose proposition.
516-922-WINE. Let's hear the famous laugh.
I'm like a wind-up toy. I've never stopped doing that. I had a girl I used to go out with just emailed me 2 days ago from Israel saying, is this you? Did they steal you? And it's a guy laughing somewhat like me in a movie or something. I had a great guy. Had all these gadgets that were going to make me a fortune. And the guy, I'm sure you know a million guys that had a company, and the company was doing so well, they overexpand, and they go into the crapper. And, but it had like 30 different Jackie laughs. I'll send you the files.
And you have like a museum at your house, right?
Well, it's just all the stuff I've accumulated, and it winds up being crazy. In fact, I got to siphon off one or two things, just put it on your wall of shame here, like a Willie Nelson autograph or something like that.
That'd be awesome.
Me and Willie Nelson emailed each other jokes.
Oh, very cool.
And he's, the same jokes. We both know all the jokes. He's just so delightful. But it's great fun. So there's my old radio partner, Ian. I had a radio show. I don't know what's going on with me. I had a radio show on Howard's 101 for 8 years.
Okay.
From like 2008 to 2004. And my radio partner is a video producer, and he produced a documentary called Joke Man. That's finally we got it distributed, and that's going to be on all the streaming platforms. Probably not until April. It's really funny. You finally get it distributed, but it takes so long to get into the whole thing. But it's great. You'll love it. I promise you'll love it.
So I was looking forward to this interview because obviously I'm a huge fan. And, like I think about like how you got to put yourself out there as a comedian. And this isn't going to dial into what we usually talk about. But, think about the courage you got to have to go stand up in front of a crowd. I mean, you could be funny in front of your friends. Some of your friends think you're hysterical. But when you have to be funny.
There's those two things are just not related.
No, not at all.
But Henny Youngman used to say the definition of a comedian is somebody who made his uncle laugh at a family party. But he was being goofy, because, and you read about public speaking itself is a very strange bird. General Patton would walk into machine gun fire with his men. He just had that kind of raw courage. But he could not stand up in front of 100 people and deliver a speech. He was petrified, which it's hard to,
It's a different world. Like I talk all day long. I talk to people, and sometimes if I get in a big venue and have to do something and talk to, you definitely get nervous. I mean, it's not what you do every day. So it goes back to that whole philosophy of, all right, you better be uncomfortable.
Now,
you
when
be
you go
comfortable
up
in those uncomfortable situations.
If you're addressing a crowd of your real estate people or people wannabes or clients or something, I'm sure you're very comfortable. But all of a sudden, if you step into the ring of, let me tell you this one,
it can get a little, and I've emceed some things, and when you can hear a pin drop, it gets like really, really.
I've always said that what it feels like when you bomb a joke, and it's a whole nother book. But I tell people, like if you tell a joke and nobody laughs, one of the best days of my life is the day I heard the expression flop sweat. If you're doing bad on stage and all of a sudden the cold feeling going up your neck, I thought that was God's way of telling me to get off stage. And then when somebody used that expression, I said, and of course you find out it's across the board. But I tell people, if you don't know what flop sweat is, remember the feeling that if you went into the bathroom and you pulled down your pants and sat down on the toilet, but you forgot to put the ring down, and you go sailing past where it was supposed to be like, oh, I'm an asshole. That is the feeling.
It's got to be. But what a great guest to have. I thought it'd be fun and lighthearted to bring Jackie down. He was gracious enough to drive down from Long Island today. We're gonna go have a nice dinner with a couple guys.
That's why I came. He's buying me a steak dinner.
I'm feeding him. He loves steak. That's his MO from what I hear.
I'm the kind of guy that'll spend $40 in gas to get a $10 steak dinner.
And make sure you call him up 516-922-WINE.
All my gigs, if you want to come to a show, all my gigs are on jokeland.com. I'm on TikTok, and they're just going crazy. It's funny because you put up a new joke, but then they go back, and all the numbers on all the jokes go up. I've got I think 250 jokes on there, and they're all, it's the same deal. They can't be dirty. They can't be dirty because it's got to be radio friendly, but you can sneak around. I don't know if it's a Chinese or who's doing I don't know who's.
It's all the Chinese.
But I don't know who's monitoring or censoring. So you learn to just not say it,
Yeah.
Instead of penis, I say rocket. You know what I mean? And it's like their computer,
rocket.
Oh, what rocket? I don't know rocket. And it's so filthy.
I got to tell you, that's the best. That's good. That's good stuff. All right, we're going to have some good jokes at the office this week. A lot of rocket jokes running around.
Well, did I bring you a joke book?
No, you didn't.
I didn't send you a joke. I did too. Give you a joke.
No, last time. I think when you were down last time.
I got some in the car. I will give you one so you can have it right here.
Awesome. I'll have it at my office
on the show.
Yeah, we'll get some. We're going to do some great stuff.
I'm working near here, but it's already sold out at a place called the Elks Lodge in Brigantine.
Brigantine, yeah, it's a good spot. The Elks Lodge, yeah. You got to be a member there. My brother's a member there.
But this is open to the public. Yep. But the members got first shot, and it's sold out already.
Awesome. So that's great.
What good it is to the public.
When is that?
Actually, the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Which is usually weird. People
First
say,
week of December.
That's a family weekend. No. By the time you're done with Thanksgiving dinner, you're ready. It's enough family.
November 29th?
26th.
26th? When's it? Something like that. It's awesome. So check out on jokeland.com.
Who's listening to this show? Jersey or national?
We have people all over.
Anybody in Florida?
Probably not a whole lot in Florida. Mostly Delaware County. All this Delaware Valley region.
I've worked this area. I headlined in Philadelphia for 4 years before I met Howard.
Okay.
All the clubs, Comedy Factory Outlet and Comedy Works and Bananas. And
I used to go to Comedy Factory. Yeah, that was cool.
Oh, that was great.
Good stuff.
With Clay.
That's awesome.
We got endless stories. Listen, thank you
thanks
for having me.
Thanks for coming in, Jack. Appreciate it. Ryan and Shay, great job as always.
Great job, you guys.
They were awesome.